Welcome back to Behind the Scenes on Planet Doug for Sunday, November 12th, I think. I honestly thought it was Saturday, right up until I was about to push record on the camera. And before I did that, I checked the date and I was kind of shocked to see that it was Sunday. I honestly thought it was Saturday. I don't know where Saturday went. The whole day just disappeared, apparently. So yeah, November 12th, Sunday. And it's actually Diwali, which kind of slipped right past me until last night. I noticed that the parking lot here at the hotel was jammed with cars. There's even a tour bus out front. So I think all the hotels here in Port Dickson are completely full for the long weekend. And I was downtown yesterday on my bike, and I saw there was kind of a Diwali carnival setup, like a bunch of stalls at the side of the road selling stuff for Diwali. And last night I heard a lot of fireworks going off. And once again, I didn't think I was going to record any kind of a behind the scenes video this morning, but I kind of just felt like chatting for a little bit. It kind of happened when I plugged in my kettle to make the cup of coffee. As soon as I'm drinking coffee, I feel like I want to talk to somebody. I'm sort of looking around. It's like, who can I talk to? And there's nobody here, right, to talk to. So I'm talking to you, whoever's on the other end of this video at the moment. And as always, the first thing on my mind is technology. Generally not in a good way, because yesterday I was very careful to charge up all my batteries for the Olympus. I have my battery charger over there, and I have to use a shim now in order to push the battery against the contacts so that the yellow charging light comes on. And I went through all three batteries. I put each one into the charger, and then the yellow light comes on, a solid yellow light to indicate that it's charging. And 2 or 3 hours would go by per battery. It takes a long time, or at least it feels like it took 2 to 3 hours. And then eventually the yellow light goes off to indicate, okay, the battery's fully charged. I would take the battery out, put in the next one. And I went through all three batteries. And then this morning, as I was setting up the Olympus, I put in one of the three freshly charged batteries, and of course I had to reset the year, the date, and the time on the camera, because every time I take a battery out, like even for half a second, I lose all the settings, and I have to and I really like having the date set because it embeds the date and the time in the video file, and you have to have that in order to remember to keep track of all your videos and keep them organized, you know. So yeah, I have to reset the date and the time every single time I change the battery. So I had to do that, and then I turned on the camera, set the date and the time, and then I noticed that the low battery thing was flashing, and then the computer shut off. So whatever happened yesterday, that particular battery didn't get charged up at all, and I don't know what's going on. It's one of those complicated situations where now you have to put on your, Sherlock Holmes hat and conduct some scientific experiments to figure out what is going on. Because the fact that you get a low battery warning on your camera doesn't necessarily mean the battery has a low charge. It could mean that the battery sensing mechanism in the camera is malfunctioning, because I've had that happen in the past with various cameras. The camera tells you the battery has no power, but it turns out it's the camera that was wrong and the battery actually had power. So you don't know what is the problem. Is it the camera or is it the battery? So you have to do some tests to figure that out. And then if the battery isn't charging, well, is it a problem with the charger or is it a problem with the battery? Because I noticed the battery that did not hold a charge, the one that I put in and said it was dead, it was not an official Olympus battery. It was like a third-party battery that I bought at a shop in KL a couple of years ago, or who knows how many years ago. So maybe because it was a cheaper third-party battery, maybe it's reached the end of its life and it just can't hold a charge anymore. So that could be the problem too. So anyway, now I have to do a bunch of tests to figure out where the problem is. Is the charger not working? Is the battery not working? Or is the camera not working? But I'll get it figured out eventually. But one thing I noticed, I think I saw online, there was some reference to being able to power the camera with a cable, like plug it into the wall with a charger, like not use a battery at all. You just, charge it directly from a power source. And that would be ideal for a setup like this, because then I don't have to worry about batteries. But the way Olympus cameras work, it has a proprietary port. It's not USB-C or USB micro or any of those standard USB-C ports. Olympus developed their own, and you have to have the cable that came with the camera. And right now I don't have a cable for this camera, so I can't even plug it in if I wanted to. I talked about that when I learned that there's several new firmware updates for this camera in particular available, and I was going to spend a couple hours one day and update the firmware, but it turns out Olympus also has a very complicated way of doing it. Normally, for every camera I've owned, you just download the firmware to an SD card, and then you put the SD card into the camera, and that will update the firmware. But the way this camera works, you have to do it through a cable and plug the camera to a laptop through the cable, and then you install the firmware update that way. That's the only way to do it as far as I can tell. And since I don't have a cable, I can't update the firmware either. So yeah, technology problems in my life, or issues, technology stuff I have to deal with every single morning when I wake up. It's the first thing I do every morning. And yesterday I did another test with my GoPro, which was quite interesting. Was I did a test the other day comparing 1080p to 4K. I was curious on many levels how that would work. How big would the file size be? Would my editing program be able to handle 4K video, exporting, editing and exporting 4K video? And would the 4K video look a lot better in terms of resolution than 1080p? Because in the past, I've done testing like this in the past, and my overall feeling is it really doesn't matter. Like even a lot of very big, very popular YouTubers, they only shoot in 1080p. They don't bother with 4K or 5K or 8K because they don't see an appreciable difference in quality between 1080p and 4K. And then the vast majority of people in the world are watching YouTube videos on their phones. So having 4K on your phone, I don't think it makes any difference. 1080p, 4K. Half the time, when I'm watching a YouTube video on my phone, I watch the whole video and I've enjoyed it from beginning to end. And it's only at the end of the video I realized it was playing the entire time in 480 or 720. Like even though the video was available in 4K, because of the internet connection and downloading speed, it just defaulted to 480, and I never noticed. It looked fine to me. So I guess if you have like a 80-inch flat screen, then you would notice. But the people who watch YouTube videos on their giant flat screen TV or monitor, I mean, they're out there. Friends of mine do that, and I hear from them all the time that higher resolution looks so much better on their massive TV screens or their, humongous monitors. But they are definitely in the minority. But anyway, I wanted to do this test, and I was completely surprised. This came out of left field. It wasn't a resolution difference between 1080p and 4K. The colors completely changed for the better on the 4K. And I don't know, I always talk about how the GoPro video, I kind of like the punchy, saturated look of the video. I like the bright colors and the saturation. But somehow, when I was doing this test, and now that I'm comparing 1080p to 4K, the 1080p looks horrendous to me because of the color saturation. It's so saturated, it's cartoony. And then I have it side by side with the 4K, and the 4K video looks true to life. particularly my skin tones, and my hair color, and the color of painted walls around me, and tiles, and everything like that. Everything looks natural on the 4K video, whereas it's heavily oversaturated in the 1080p by comparison. And I was chatting with a friend of mine about this issue, and then he suggested, well, why don't you go for the middle, try 2.7K. You might get all the advantages of 4K, but it will have smaller file sizes compared to 4K. So it'll be better than 1080p, but not huge 4K file sizes. So yesterday I did a test. I compared 1080p with 2.7K and 4K. I shot 2 videos in 2 different lighting situations and did a comparison, and again I was completely surprised. The results surprised me because the 2.7K video looked a little bit better than the 1080p, and again in terms of the color and the saturation. In terms of resolution, again on my phone and on my laptop and on my tablet, I don't see any difference. Like, it doesn't jump out at me like, wow, 2.7K is so much more detail than 1080p. I don't see a difference, but I did see a slight improvement in the color, but then again a big improvement from 2.7K to 4K. And the video file size was the same as 4K. I shot, they were just 1-minute video clips. That's how long they were, and there was not as big a difference as I expected. I think the 1080p was about 380 megabytes, call it 400 megabytes, and the 2.7K was about 750 megabytes, and then the 4K was 763 megabytes. So 2.7K and 4K, the file size was the same, around 700 megabytes, double the size of 1080p basically. I was expecting it to go, in terms of file size, 1080p, 4K, and 2.7K right in the middle, but in fact, in terms of file size, 2.7K and 4K were identical, and then, twice the size of 1080p. So basically, looking at the video quality and the file sizes, it seems like a no-brainer now to shoot in 4K. Then I get the nicer, more natural, more realistic colors. So shoot in 4K, but then edit and export at 1080p, because in my testing, the editing and exporting of 2.7K and 4K, that is too much. My laptop can't handle it. My life can't handle it. I'm too old to wait that long for a video to process, to export. It just takes forever. And then the file size of the exported video is just massive. And there's no way I could ever upload a file like that to YouTube. I can barely upload 1080p videos. But it looks like I can go for a bit of a compromise. As I said, shoot in 4K, get the nicer image quality, but then edit and export in 1080p, and I still end up with 1080p file sizes for the finished videos, but with the 4K video quality. So yeah, I have no idea what's going on there. It doesn't make any sense. There's no reason that there should be such a dramatic difference in color between 1080p and 4K, but there is. And again, it could be my GoPro. So today I'm going to do another test because I have two GoPros. This is with my main GoPro, but I have a secondary GoPro, the one that I always use on a chest harness. I'm going to do the exact same test with that GoPro to see if it can reproduce the results. So it could be that my main GoPro is just malfunctioning, and at 1080p it's oversaturating the video for some reason. So anyway, I'm going to do another test today with a second GoPro, compare it to my first GoPro, and then that will make up my mind whether I should shoot in 4K or not. Since I woke up this morning, I've already watched a bunch of new videos, and the main one that I wanted to talk about is from the Lost Boys. And the Lost Boys, of course, are these two Americans, and they're doing a very long motorcycle trip across Sumatra, basically from Jakarta to the northern tip of Sumatra. So of course, that's very interesting to me because I spent a lot of time in Sumatra over the last few years. And in this video, they rode their motorbikes from the town of Payakumbuh. Payakumbuh is right beside Bukittinggi, and you go to Payakumbuh to see the Harau Valley. So their last big adventure, they shot a video of the Harau Valley, and now they're riding their motorbikes from Payakumbuh to Lake Toba. And to me, that's fascinating because I enjoy their videos, and they're going to Lake Toba, a place I know fairly well, and the other YouTubers I've been following lately, LSWR and Vild Carlos Appeared, they have also just been to Lake Toba. And then there is a YouTubing couple that lives in Tuk Tuk, lives on Samasir Island in the village of Tuk Tuk, and they are YouTubers as well, and they have a YouTube channel called Exploring Sumatra. Carly and Agung, the two of them, and I've been watching their videos on their channel for years, ever since they started posting them from Sumatra. So yeah, I've been watching a lot of videos from Lake Toba, and now the Lost Boys are going to Lake Toba. And it was kind of interesting to contrast the Lost Boys experiences with someone like LSWR, because as I talked about in one of my previous videos, LSWR went to, Padang, Bukittinggi, and then he and his girlfriend took a night bus from Bukittinggi all the way to Lake Toba. And that was a pretty difficult journey for them. Like, it was a night bus too, like it went all night long, 15, 16, 17 hours, I'm not sure, but it was a long bus ride. And I know that road that they follow, very windy mountain road in parts, so being on a bus, being thrown from side to side the entire night long. I mean, that's a long, hard journey, particularly when you don't even get the benefit of seeing the views, right? And the Lost Boys, also LSWR, he didn't go to any of the other attractions around Bukittinggi. So he didn't go to Lake Maninjau. He didn't go to the Harau Valley. He didn't climb one of the volcanoes. He didn't visit, the countryside outside of Bukitingi. There was a lot to see and do there that, for whatever reason, he didn't have the time, I guess, and he didn't have his own transportation, so he didn't go to any of these places. So instead, he took the night bus all the way to Lake Toba, and I was thinking it was kind of a, not the most efficient way of experiencing that part of Sumatra, because he's making such a huge effort to get to Lake Toba to see this big volcanic crater lake, when there was an equally majestic and beautiful volcanic crater lake right there in Bukitingi. It was like 30 kilometers away. He could have gone there on a day trip. So it's kind of weird, to work so hard to get to Lake Toba to see this crater lake when there was an equivalent crater lake right where he started his journey from. And then with the Lost Boys, of course, they did all that stuff. They went to Lake Maninjau, they went to Harau Valley, they went to see pretty much everything. And then, because they have their own motorcycles, instead of just doing a night bus to Lake Toba where you see and experience nothing, they saw everything along the way. I think the whole journey, they spread it out over maybe 6 days. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe 3 or 4 days of riding the motorcycle, maybe 3, like 3 days of riding. And then 2 days they spent in a town along the way. They checked into a hotel, and then they just stayed there for 3 nights. So I gave them 2 full days where all they did was relax and edit video. So, the whole journey for them from Payakumbu, Bukitingi to Lake Toba was like a 5 or 6 day journey with a couple of days off along the way. And they got to ride their motorcycles down these small country roads, mountain roads, and they saw all kinds of amazing things. So that's definitely more my kind of experience, and it makes for a very entertaining video. Their video, the one that I'm talking about, is called What Traveling Indonesia is Really Like. And what they mean by that title is the traffic. And they talk about that a lot in their video. I don't know what their frame of reference is for that kind of traffic, but they talked a lot about how in West Sumatra the traffic was like crazy and chaotic. And then they were told that when they go to North Sumatra, the traffic was going to get even crazier and more chaotic, and by extension, more dangerous. And again, I'm not sure what they're comparing it to, but they talk about that a lot. But I had a slightly different perspective on it than they did, because when I was there riding the scooter and riding my bicycle, yes, I did see chaotic traffic patterns, compared to, Canada, of course, because traffic in Canada, pretty much everybody is in a straight line moving at the same speed. It's just like bop, 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 bop. It's perfectly grid-like. Just everyone's moving in the same direction at the same speed in the same lane, and you only get one type of vehicle at a time, really. In city streets, you're going to have cars, pickup trucks, SUVs. That's all you're going to get. So you're not going to be sharing the road with huge transport trucks or motorcycles, three-wheeled taxis, small, slow-moving vans, picking up school children. And you don't get the same confusion of one-way streets and people doing U-turns and that sort of thing. So yeah, compared to Canada, the traffic in Sumatra is quite chaotic. And yet, I don't know, I didn't have the same sense that it was so dangerous or bad, if you know what I mean. It's different. It's sort of like what traffic is like is related a lot to your expectations. And everyone in Sumatra drives the same way. So if everyone is following this kind of chaotic pattern, then there's actually there's a system inside the chaos. You see what I mean? Like, if someone in Canada just stops their car in the middle of the road for no reason, it causes a problem. Like, you're going to rear end them. You're going to cause an accident because nobody's expecting you to do that. But in Sumatra, everybody just does that all the time. People are just, driving their car, whatever, and for whatever reason they need to stop because they want to answer their phone or something. Well, they just sort of stop wherever they are and they start talking on their phone. Or they want to do a U-turn, they'll just stop. If they're in the left-hand lane and they want to do a U-turn to the right, they'll just sort of do it from the left-hand lane, right? Which again, in Canada would cause an accident because nobody's expecting you to do that. But when I was there in Sumatra, I expected everybody to be doing this all the time, and all the Indonesians, they all do this. So everybody is expecting it. So it is chaotic in a way, but if everyone is expecting you to do these chaotic things, then in the end it really isn't that big a problem, because, or I should say, it didn't bother me emotionally. Or it's not like I was going down the road on the scooter and then somebody just stops in front of me for no reason. It's not like it induces road rage, like, oh, you stupid driver, what are you doing? I didn't have that reaction because I was expecting everybody to do that all the time. So the guy stops in front of me for no reason. It's like, oh, okay, now I just got to go around him. And all the Indonesians go around him, and people behind him in a car who can't get past, they tended to just wait patiently. So like nobody was laying on the horn and getting angry. It was almost like everybody made an agreement amongst themselves, like, I'm not going to get angry with you for just parking your car and blocking traffic. But part of the deal is, well, if you get to do it, then I get to do it too. It's like everyone has made a gentleman's agreement. Like, if you pull a U-turn in front of me without signaling, I'm not going to get angry or upset with you for doing it. But as long as I can do it too, and you won't get angry with me. So that's kind of my take on it. I noticed there was one moment in their video, the one moment when they really pointed out a dangerous situation, and they weren't shouting at the driver because it was a guy in a truck, who blew past them and he was way, way ahead of them. But, on the video, the Lost Boys were like, whoa, did you see that? Oh, he almost, they were reacting emotionally to this crazy thing that this bus driver did. But, as they say on a lot of YouTube videos that I watch, these, lawyers react to traffic accidents or whatever. And if you slow down the video and look and pay attention, you'll see. And if you watch that video carefully, I think the Lost Boys caused much of that problem. Because, this happens if you're two people riding together on a motorcycle, each of you on a separate motorcycle, and you're shooting video. Quite often you kind of lose track of your surroundings and you'll ride side by side because you're sort of interacting. Or in this case, there was a three-wheeled motorcycle, like a three-wheeled motorcycle taxi with a sidecar that was filled with like 8 children. And they were talking about, wow, look at all the kids. And they're like waving to the kids and chatting back and forth with them. But the Lost Boys, while they were doing that, had pulled their motorcycles side by side, and they had moved out into oncoming traffic. So they were blocking both lanes behind them. And I could see in their video that this truck came up behind them, and this truck wanted to pass, to pass them and pass the three-wheeled motorcycle, but they couldn't because the Lost Boys were taking up the whole road as they're riding along and filming and waving to everybody and joking with the kids. And then eventually, I guess maybe the Lost Boy saw the truck behind him, I'm not sure, but then he eventually moved over just enough that the truck could get by them, and then the truck hit the gas, but at exactly the wrong moment, and that there happened to be a motorcycle coming, a scooter coming towards them. So you basically had this, you know, mini taxi, the three-wheeled motorcycle with 8 school children, and then a motorcycle coming this way, the Lost Boys kind of around them, and then this truck like trying to thread the needle right between them, heading for a head-on collision. And like anything could have happened. Like if the truck tried to swerve out of the way of the head-on collision, it would have hit all the children. But luckily, the oncoming people on the scooter, they knew. I mean, they were just like me. It was like just like I've been talking about. I developed this habit in Sumatra as well. You look at the road ahead of you when you're on a scooter, and if you see something big on the road, you realize that something big might pull out to pass that other thing, and then you have to get out of the way. That's part of the gentleman's agreement. So you're on a scooter, you're the smallest thing. It is your responsibility to get out of the way of everybody else. Those are the rules. And the Lost Boys were kind of breaking that rule by blocking the road and not letting the truck get past them. And then, of course, in this case, when the truck did barrel past them at high speed, the scooter coming towards the truck quickly pulled over to the side of the road, you know, hugged the shoulder, and then the truck, you know, threaded the needle between all of them. And it really was a dangerous situation. But again, slow down the video and look at it carefully. I think the Lost Boys contributed to that dangerous situation because of the way they were riding their motorcycles. So I found that kind of interesting. But I guess what I'm saying is I was kind of surprised that they were so emotional and talk so much about the crazy driving, because I thought they would be completely accustomed to it. I think they've been riding their motorcycles on Sumatra for 6 months now, and they rode all through Jakarta and Java. I thought it would just be a day in the park to them, like a normal day. But yeah, they were talking about it a lot, and yeah, it really made an impression on them. They had a lot of really good adventures on that day. They did go to a waterfall, of course. That's a YouTuber thing, you know, you got to go to the waterfall. So they saw a waterfall on the map, the local famous one, and they went to the waterfall. And I always say that I'm not that interested in waterfalls, but the advantage, there is sort of a side benefit of going to the waterfall, in that waterfalls tend to be in mountains coming off of cliffs. So by going to the waterfall, you end up going through some beautiful scenery to get to the waterfall. And you know, it takes you off the main highway most of the time and takes you off into the countryside. And you know, whatever, you know, to me it's a little bit of a cliche to go to the waterfall and then get some video of you frolicking in the pool at the bottom, and then you got to get the shot. Once you've got your waterfall shot, well, you can pack up and leave again. You know, it's a little bit of a cliche. But the positive thing is, yeah, it does take you into some beautiful countryside. And then while they were there, they noticed a man up a very tall tree, and he was getting honey from some kind of beehive or something. And they were interacting with this guy, talking with him, and I didn't quite understand what was going on, but I guess the bee guy wanted them to come see what he was doing, or he wanted to show it to them. They could take video of it, I'm not sure. But somehow the Lost Boys went up around that tree, and then at that point the guy kind of shook the tree or shook the hive. Maybe he does that to get all the bees to leave so he can get the honey. But anyway, the Lost Boys found them, you know, just in the middle of a swarm of what they didn't say they were bees, like giant hornets, like giant stinging monsters. And then they just ran for their lives. But it turns out that all of their gear, their knapsacks and their stuff, they left it on a platform near the waterfall, and the tree with all the hornets was between them and their gear. So they basically had to run the gauntlet the Hornet Gauntlet, and then run past. And of course, they're all stripped down. The B guy, he was covered head to toe with clothing. He clearly put on several layers of clothing, long sleeves. I can't remember whether he had gloves or not, but he had like a hood over his head. You know, he was as covered up as he could be. He didn't have like official beekeeping clothing, but he had put on protective clothing. But the Lost Boys, you know, they were in shorts because they'd just gone swimming in the waterfall. So they were completely uncovered, unprotected. And then they just go running past the tree, you know, all, trying to keep all the hornets away. I don't think any of them got stung, but yeah, I guess it was a near thing. And they had to run, get their bags, and slowly, you know, quickly pack up all their gear while they're fighting off all the wasps, and then run down the trail and get out of there. I thought that was kind of funny. And then from the waterfall, they followed a really beautiful, winding, narrow mountain road. It looked gorgeous. To be honest, I didn't know the scenery in that direction between Bukitingi and Lake Toba was that beautiful. I had no idea, so it was like, ooh, it would have been nice to go in that direction. I thought maybe it would be a big, major road with a lot of traffic on it, and of course all roads in Sumatra have a lot of traffic on them, but the scenery was a lot nicer than I expected. And while they were on this narrow mountain road, they came across a colony of gibbons. And yeah, beautiful, beautiful animals. And to see them swinging through the trees, yeah, that was a really magical moment. And then eventually they got to Lake Toba, and their video ended when they arrived at the lake. I don't think they went to Tuk Tuk. So like Tuk Tuk is the tourist town on Samasir. That's where the majority of all the guest houses and the restaurants, all the tourist places are there in Tuk Tuk. And it's a pretty big lake. It's like 100 kilometers from end to end. So I guess where they arrived at the southern tip of Lake Toba, they just stopped there for the night, and I guess they're going to find a hotel there. So they may or may not go to Tuk Tuk. I assume they will, because, you know, it's a big part of Lake Toba, of the tourist experience there. So they at least have to show it, I think, in their videos. But, you know, when I spend time at Lake Toba, at the beginning, in particular, or maybe I've been there a few times, but I had my bicycle and I had the opportunity to ride along the shoreline of Lake Toba quite a bit. So I saw a lot of other small towns. Like I stayed in Tuk Tuk quite a long time, but then I also stayed in some other towns. There's a main town at the northern tip of Lake Toba where the big famous waterfall was. And I went to that waterfall, so I could notch one notch on my belt for waterfalls. I did go to the big waterfall at Lake Toba. And then, yeah, there's all these villages, like fishing villages along the coast, and really, really interesting places to check out. And I assume that's where Lost Boys went this time. And as I watched their video, I amused myself, as I always do, by keeping track of the number of times they say guys, or the equivalent, because they have that verbal tick to a large extent. A lot of YouTubers do, and I've noticed it in so many YouTube videos that now I've developed what I call the GPM rating, the guys per minute, how many times they say guys per minute of video. And so far the Lost Boys are the champions. Like nobody comes close to them when it comes to saying guys. And for this video they got a GPM of, I thought I knew the number but I've forgotten, 2.17. So they say guys or folks, you know, things like that, you know, like addressing their audience, you know, say, hey, good morning guys, wow guys, Lake Toba guys, isn't it amazing guys, and look at that waterfall guys. They do it 2.17 times per minute of video. So for a GPM of 2.17 for this video. So yeah, that's kind of funny. Yeah, the other day I was talking about a video from Unseen Voices. He's another YouTuber that I've been following lately. And I talked about a few things in his latest videos, but there was a couple of things I forgot to mention. In this video, he was in Jakarta and he was searching for an external hard drive. He was running out of memory, which I could relate to. I kind of enjoy his videos from that point of view. They're nothing like, they're not polished travel vlogs in any way. It's basically him going out, holding onto a GoPro and just filming his whole day as he's running errands, shopping for electronics, doing all the logistics and behind the scenes sort of stuff. And of course, that's like catnip for me. I enjoy watching that. I can relate to people on that level. But I really get a kick out of Unseen Voices because he wanted to buy an external hard drive, and he went to an electronics market, and I think I talked about this in my previous video, but instead of looking for a store, like, I mean, if I were in Kuala Lumpur or even here in Port Dickson and I needed to buy an external hard drive, I know exactly what type of store to go to. I know what stores carry that kind of gear and what stores don't. It's not a huge secret. So if I was going to like Loyat Plaza in Kuala Lumpur, there are stores like, Thunder Match, these big electronic department stores, and I know they have a big section where they sell nothing but external hard drives. It would never occur to me to go, for example, to one of those small smartphone shops, right? But that's what he did. He went into this market, big tower, multi-level, huge building, and he had been to this place before, big electronics store, an entire building devoted to electronics. But then the very first place he went to was an Oppo smartphone shop. I mean, we've all seen them a million times. If you're here in Malaysia or Indonesia, smartphone shops are everywhere. And he went from floor to floor to floor, and they were all, here's a Samsung smartphone shop, here's an Oppo, here's a Huawei, just everywhere. And he would go up to all of them and just sort of walk up. And he was using Google Translate to say, external hard drive in English or in Indonesian, and he would just walk up to them like, do you have external hard drive, and again, I'm sort of screaming at the screen of my laptop going, well, no, that's an Oppo smartphone stall. Like, why would you I just don't get it. Why would you go to one of those shops to buy an external hard drive? And even if for some reason you're not aware that it's a smartphone shop, it's not that hard to scan the shelves. So of course what I would do is I walk through one of these electronics markets, and I'll go from store to store, and I can kind of look at all the things on display. I can look through their glass case, and they don't have any hard drives here. And then I go to the next one. Like I wouldn't go to smartphone shops, but if I see like a laptop store, something that sells a variety of laptops and computer gear, that sort of thing, I'll go in there, and then I'll walk up and down the aisles and scan. And they may even have a couple of hard drives in, on a display, but I'll look at them and they'll be like 1 terabyte or 500 gigabytes. And I can see, they're not big enough. I can tell whether they have what I need or not. It's not that hard to do. And then I go from store to store to store until I end up at a place like Thunder Match, or what's the big one at the top of Loyat? There's one I went to all the time. I forget the name of it now, but anyway, it's a huge store. And then you go in there, and then you finally find a place that has external hard drives. You can see them on display, and you can look at them, and okay, they've got this one, oh, 2 terabyte, 3 terabyte, 4 terabyte. And then, you just look for them until you find them. But in Unseen Voices, just kept wandering into random smartphone shops, tiny little ones, where they hire these, young women. They're there as the clerks, and they don't speak English, of course, and they don't really know anything about electronics. They're not knowledgeable about it. They're just there to act as a store clerk. You want to buy this, and they take the money. They don't know anything about the phones, or, you know, that's not what they're hired for. But he just went into all these places, and they all looked at him like, we have no idea what you're talking about. He's like, huh? Like, what are you looking for? And they're like, no, we don't have that. Like, why would we have that? So it's sort of like, you know, going into a camera store and then asking them if they sell cornflakes. Like, you guys got any cornflakes? And it's like, no, we sell cameras. Like, why would we sell breakfast cereal? You know, it's not quite that extreme, but it's similar to that. And I found that kind of amusing. And one thing about him I noticed as well, he wants to use a credit card everywhere. And I'm watching him do this, and I keep thinking, what does this mean, my reaction to him? Does it mean he's doing something weird, or I'm just more out of date than I realize I am? Because he would go into like an Indomaret, like a convenience store, any kind of, yeah, like a 7-Eleven type store, and he wants to get a cold brew coffee. That's his thing. He loves cold brew. And he would get, you know, the cold brew, a bottle out of the thing, and he brings it to the, and then he gives them a credit card, like MasterCard. So yeah, just pay for it with my MasterCard. And quite a few times I've seen him do this, and they're like, no, we can't take this, right? It's like, we don't accept MasterCard. And he always seems surprised. It's like, oh, I can't pay. And in this particular video, he didn't even have any money. Like, he had no cash, not even enough to pay for 1 cup of cold coffee. So then he had to find an ATM. So he just said to the store clerk, you know, it's like, ATM, ATM, ATM. And then they happened to have one in the store, and then he just sort of went straight up to, it was like a random, you know, like these ATM machines that don't even belong to a particular bank. They're like run by some kind of a company, the random ATM company that connects to all kinds of different banks, I guess. And he just grabs whatever card he has, puts it in there, and just takes out a little bit of money, you know, just enough to pay for the cold coffee. And I always find that kind of interesting, because I would never do any of those things. I would never use my credit card to begin with. I'm just way too paranoid about that. I never use it. I don't even have it. You know, my credit card is still in Canada. Then the new one that got shipped out to me, I haven't had it shipped to me. And if I had it here, the physical card, it would never occur to me to go into a 7-Eleven or Indomaret, buy 1 cup of coffee, 1 can of coffee, and then, you know, charge it to my credit card. That just seems weird and really risky. And then if I had to get cash, of course, I only go to an ATM inside a bank. I want to go to a big bank, one that I'm familiar with, and I use an ATM that's inside the bank building itself. I would never use one in a department store, on the street, or in a convenience store. And I would never use some random no-name ATM. To me, it's just way too risky. And after all that, I would never use my ATM card to withdraw, you know, $5 so I can buy a cold coffee. So all these things he did seemed weird to me, and I would never ever do them. But then I end up wondering, well, is it me? Like, I know I'm always outdated when it comes to technology. I'm always falling behind. So maybe this is what everyone does. Like, in our cashless society, does everybody pay for their cold coffee with a credit card now? And I'm the weird one because I'm always trying to, you know, pay in cash and do things like that. Yeah, I have no idea. Anyway, I just thought of that random aspect to his video, the last one that I saw. I don't think he ever did find an external hard drive, so I guess we'll have to wait till his next video to find out if he ever did track one down. And then I was amused to see that in the comments, because almost all the people that comment on his videos are Indonesians, And there are a lot of comments saying things like, dude, just shop online, just use Shopee, or whatever the equivalents are in Indonesia. Just buy it online and have it shipped to your hotel, right? And everyone tells me that all the time. And yeah, it's like most of the time it is the easiest way these days. That's why so many stores around the world are going bankrupt, going out of business, because nobody buys things in stores anymore anyway. You just, buy it online and have it shipped to wherever you are. And then people are telling him, that he should do that. So he's getting all this advice of what stores he should go to. They were telling him, basically, he went to the wrong place. They told him that that building he went to, the giant electronics building, that whole market was only for smartphones and repairs of smartphones. That's what the whole building was about. So he went to the wrong place entirely. And they were saying, well, if you want to buy external hard drive, you got to go to this place. And we'll see, maybe in his next video, he'll record going there, and we'll see whether he's ever successful. I hope he is. First thing on my mind for a pop culture roundup is MMA. UFC 295 is happening right now, and I can't watch it live because, yeah, it's a pay-per-view event, and it's not like I'm going to pay $80 in order to watch a UFC event. I don't even know if you could do it here. Probably not. But what I do is I just call up a website where I can see the results. They post like a live blog round by round, where they summarize the fights. And I just sort of keep track of it as it's happening online. And right now they're going through the preliminary card. They aren't on the main card yet. And the two main fights I'm interested in are on the main card, and I talked about it in my last video. Is the main event is a light heavyweight championship fight between Jiří Procházka and Alex Pereira. Very excited about that. And I think in my last video I predicted that Pereira was going to win. So yeah, I'm not confident about that pick, but I'm going to stick with it. And then there is a heavyweight fight. They're fighting for the interim heavyweight championship because John Jones technically is still the heavyweight champion. He's just injured, so he wasn't able to fight on this card because he was injured. So we've got two other heavyweights, Sergey Pavlovich and Tom Aspinall. Aspinall is from the UK, and they are fighting for the interim heavyweight championship. And what was my pick there? I think I picked Aspinall to win. But again, to be honest, there's really no way to know. The reason I picked Pereira over Procházka is because I thought Procházka wouldn't be tough enough. Like he isn't mean enough. He doesn't have an edge, really. He's very much a samurai warrior who cultivates this atmosphere of the samurai, the ronin, and he's really into the martial arts lifestyle. A lot of meditation. He does these things. I didn't even know this was a thing, but apparently it's very popular. You go into a completely black room, like dark. It's like a completely light sealed room, and he will stay in this dark room for 3 days. And it just sort of develops calmness, and you meditate and do all these things. So he has that side to him, and his fighting style is very creative, a lot of movement, and does unusual things. And my idea is that Pereira, who's much more a straightforward kickboxer, because he comes from the world of kickboxing. He was a multi-champion in the world of kickboxing before he moved to MMA. And he's just a big, strong guy with a kind of a plodding manner about him. And a lot of people are saying that Prohaska is going to win because of his creativity and his movement. He's too fast. He's too unpredictable. But my sense is that he's not going to be able to hurt Pereira, and then eventually Pereira is going to walk him down, get him up against the fence, and just start landing heavy kicks and heavy punches, and will eventually get a TKO. But it could go either way. Prohaska could take him to the ground. He's probably got a better ground game, a better submission, jiu-jitsu game. Who knows? But anyway, my pick was Pereira. And when it comes to Pavlovich and Aspinall, I kind of went the other direction, because Pavlovich is very much just a brick, just a solid brick of muscle, punches really hard. I think he's been out of the first round once. He basically knocks out all his opponents in the very first round. And then Aspinall is much more of a fluid fighter, very fast, for a heavyweight, very light on his feet, very creative in his striking and his submissions and things like that. But even though I said that Pereira, who's the solid block of muscle, he's going to defeat the creative fighter in Prohaska, for Aspinall and Pavlovich, for some reason I went the other direction, and I predicted that Aspinall is going to win. So the creative, fluid, unpredictable fighter is going to beat the solid Russian muscle guy, right? And I think I decided that because Aspinall has two victories at least doing a heel hook. So he's managed to take his opponent down and then using a heel hook and get a submission. So he has, ability on the feet and on the ground. So I thought that will eventually defeat Pavlovich. So those are my picks, and I'm going to find out in an hour or two whether I am right or wrong. I don't really care, to be honest. I don't have a horse in this race. I don't like or dislike any of these particular fighters. I'm not invested in them as people. It doesn't matter to me who wins. So I'm just hoping they're going to be good fights, and eventually I'll get to watch the fights, but I won't be able to watch them live. A little bit of a tangent here, because I've had this thought on my mind, and I'm just going to get it out there, and then I don't have to think about it anymore. That recently there's been a lot of trouble with judging in MMA. A lot of discussion about how to fix the judging, because you often get a fight where it looks quite clear who won the fight. You got fighter A, fighter B, and it looks like to everybody, fighter B won the fight. And then the judges give their scorecards, and they give the fight to fighter A. Everybody says fighter B won, but the judges score the fight for fighter A, and he wins the fight based on the scorecards. And everybody's talking about how to fix this problem. A lot of discussion, focusing mainly on the scoring system, which they've taken from boxing. They call this the 10-point must system, where for every round, you assign them 10 points, and then the winner of the round gets 10, the loser gets 9, and then they add up. Every round is scored 10 to 9 or 10 to 10 or 10 to 9 basically, and then you add up all the rounds, and then whoever has the highest number wins the fight. And that's a boxing model. And in boxing, if there's a knockdown, like if you punch somebody and he's knocked down, in MMA, that's usually the end of the fight, because you knock somebody down, he's practically unconscious. Now you can jump on top of him and keep punching him, and then the referee will stop the fight and you've won. But in boxing, of course, when you knock somebody down, you can't keep punching him. They give him a count to 10. And if he can recover in 10 seconds, he can continue the fight. And if you knock somebody down, that becomes a 10-8 round, because the knockdown is worth 1 point. So instead of 10-9, it becomes 10-8. And they've taken that whole system and moved it over to MMA, and everybody's talking about how, oh, it doesn't work because it's a boxing system, it doesn't work for MMA. There's all this discussion, they go around and around and around, everybody debating new judging criterion, new numbering systems, all this sort of thing. But every time I hear them debating it, I always think nobody mentions one obvious solution. At least it seems obvious to me that one way to fix a lot of this problem is just to have more judges. Just add more judges, and that reduces the possibility statistically of there being a mistake, because in MMA they have 3 judges, and if you have 2 judges score the fight for fighter A and 1 judge for fighter B, then fighter A wins. So you end up with these really, really weird fights where one judge who is kind of screwy and has no idea what he's doing and makes the wrong decision, that one judge can sway the fight and end up giving the fight to the wrong person. Like this one judge says fighter A won the fight, and then that ends up being the decision, and it's the wrong decision. So it feels to me like they just need to add more judges. And the more judges you add, statistically, the more chances you have of getting the right score. So for my money, you should have 7 judges. And then if you have 7 judges, and if you, like they do this in a lot of sports, right? I think even in Olympics they do it. You've got, like you might have 10 judges, and then they give the, you know, whatever the performance is, a score out of 100, and then they take the lowest score and the highest score and remove them. Like you take the extremes and you actually delete them from the equation and only leave the ones in the middle, and then you always get the right score because you've got more judges, and then statistically you just end up with the correct decision. You know, I end up thinking of these old game shows like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, right? You're asked a trivia question and you can get the answer A, B, C, or D, but then if you don't know the answer, they have all these things you can do. You can call a friend, so now you can phone up an expert and they can tell you what they think the answer is. And that increases your odds of getting the right answer, but you can also ask the audience. And I haven't seen a lot of episodes of this show, but if they ask the audience, like they might have, I don't know, 300 people in the audience, and then all the audience members have a score, an electronic thing, and they can say whether the answer is A, B, C, or D. And out of those 300 people, then they see, oh, 200 people said the answer is C. So the majority of them said C is the answer, and 100% of the time, the audience is always right. And it's just a matter of mathematics, of statistics, basically. So for a UFC fight, they always have 3 judges, and because they only have 3 judges, the chances of them making a mistake is very high, and there's a continual flow of bad decisions in MMA. The entire world knows fighter A won the fight, but then the judges will say, no, fighter B won the fight. And it, you know, and so then my idea is, before you go crazy with inventing some unbelievably complex numbering system to judge the fight, well, first, let's try increasing the number of judges. And I know, I mean, it costs more money, of course, but I don't think it's a huge amount of money. They don't get paid a great deal. But let's say we go from 3 judges to 5 judges. I think you increase the chances of getting the correct decision by many, many factors. Because then you need, instead of having 2 judges out of 3 to say who's the winner. Now you need 3 judges out of 5. And if one judge is completely nuts and always gets it wrong, and they do have these judges in MMA, everybody knows who they are. I don't understand this either. There's certain judges, you see them over and over in all these different fights, and they're nuts. They have no idea what they're talking about. They always get it wrong. Everybody knows they get it wrong every time. Everybody talks about them, how they have no clue what they're doing, and yet they use those judges over and over and over. They always come back, and I've never understood that either. Everybody knows that judge is like completely out of his mind and never gets it right, and yet for the next UFC event, there he is again, same judge. Like, why don't they get a different judge? But they don't. They keep using these terrible judges, and I don't know why. But yeah, for a regular fight, out of 3 judges, it's very easy to get a wrong decision. But if you have 5 judges, you know, you'll often get, you know, the crazy judge will get it wrong, and the 4 other judges will get it right, and you get a clear winner. And if you happen to get 2 judges who get it wrong, well, chances are the 3 competent judges are going to get it right. So 3 out of 5, you have a much, much greater chance of getting an accurate decision. And if you go to, you know, 4 out of 7, even better. You know, the higher the number of judges, the better the result will be, and you can avoid this problem of all these you know, weird decisions and incorrect decisions. So I'm not saying that they should do it, because it could be a financial thing, that having 5 judges is just way too expensive, because it's not just their salary, they also have to maybe pay the judges to fly in for the event, pay for their hotel room. I don't know, do they get a per diem? But then again, you know, the UFC makes $1 billion a year in profit, so you know, they have the money to spend. So I would say, you know, even if you don't do it, it at least should be talked about. And yet, in all the discussion of MMA judging that I've seen, nobody, not one single person, has brought up the idea of just having more judges. At least go from 3 judges to 5. I think that would solve almost all the problems. But no one has even brought it up as a suggestion. Not one person. So that's me putting it out there into the world. That's my suggestion. Just have more judges and see how that goes. I was just looking at the scorecard for UFC 295. This is for the preliminary fights. And already there's all kinds of weird scoring in there. It just doesn't make sense that it should be so confusing. There's only been 4 fights so far on the preliminary card, and one of them is a majority draw. So it's pretty complicated, but 2 judges scored it as a tie, 28-28 and 28-28. So that's a tie, and one judge had it 29-28 for one of the fighters, and that fighter wins by majority draw. But again, you've got 3 judges. How is it that 2 of the judges saw the fight equally? Okay, it's a tie, but one of the judges says, no, this person won, and that one judge's decision declares the winner. And I'm willing to bet that if you had 5 judges, 7 judges would be the best, then you wouldn't get weird results like this. And the other one is a split decision. And it's absolutely insane, because we've got one judge said 29-28 for one fighter. The other judge said 29-28 for the other fighter. So the 2 judges had completely different. One says fighter A, the other judge says fighter B, but very, very close, 29-28. The third judge gave it to one of the fighters and said 30-27. So basically 100% score for one of the fighters. And they ended up with a split decision. Like, some judges think this fighter won, and the other judges think this fighter won. And it's unsatisfying. And so many of these fights end up being unsatisfying because it feels like the judges get it wrong. And I mean, they're human beings. Scoring MMA is complicated. It's difficult to do. It's a bit of a judgment call. But I think one way to get around all of these problems is just increase the number of judges. And I mean, that makes perfect sense. Every scientist will tell you that, you know, the larger your sample, the more accurate your results. It's just logic, right? If you do a survey to find out, you know, who's going to win an election, and you ask 10 people, well, you're going to get it wrong because 10 people is not enough. But if you ask 100,000 people who they're going to vote for, well, then you get a pretty accurate picture of who's going to win the election because you have a much larger sample size. And if you're doing a scientific study, you always have to have a large sample size. Otherwise, your conclusions are meaningless. And here we have a fight where your sample size is 3. And it's just ridiculously small. You should have, to be honest, you should have 9. You know, you need an odd number so that you can't have a tie. You know, if you have 10 judges, you could have 5 and 5, and then you end up with a tie. So you have to have either, you know, 3, 5, 7, 9, you know, things like that. But the more judges, the more accurate the results will be. And it just annoys me that nobody has brought this up, even as a random suggestion. So, I don't know what's going on there. And I think that brings me to the end of most of my thoughts for this morning. So I'm going to wind up behind the scenes for now. Going to keep monitoring UFC 295, see if my predictions come true. But as I said, I don't really care who wins. Any winner would be really exciting. It's kind of these fights represent sort of a new crop of fighters in the UFC. You know, it's sort of like the new generation rising to the top, and I'm pretty excited about that. So that's it, shutting down, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.